As you work on your second draft of your essay, I want you to look at mistakes with passive voice. I saw a lot of them, and so we're going to cover some information about passive voice today. So passive voice is the opposite of active voice. So we have passive voice or active voice. You don't hear active voice said very much because that's just normal sentences. Normal sentences are in active voice. And so what that means is that when you have a sentence like this, farmers plant crops, the subject is doing the action of the verb. So the farmer plants. He is doing that action. And he's doing it to the crops. So we call the subject the actor, the one doing the action, and we call the object the receiver of the action, the one that's acted upon, okay? But oftentimes when you're writing, you don't care about the farmers, you care about the crops. So sometimes the object is the focal point, the more important part of your sentence. So if you start with crops, you can't say crops plant because crops don't plant, farmers plant. So you have to use the passive voice, meaning someone else is doing it to the crops. So you would say crops are planted. Maybe you're saying something like, crops are planted close together. Let's move me. Or something like that. Okay? So crops is the subject now, and are planted is your verb. But now crops isn't doing this action. If you wanted to say who does the action, you would add by farmers. That's optional. You don't have to do it. And in the case of planting crops, it's really not necessary. Everybody knows who plants crops, so we're not confused. So when you're making the passive voice, you are always going to add a form of be and then use the past participle. Because this is present tense plant, we use present tense are. And in your papers, you're mostly using the present tense, so it'll look like this. The be verb in present tense plus the past participle of your verb. So let's look at a couple more examples. They raise animals in CAFOs. So they is your subject, raise is your verb, and animals is your object. Then we have a prepositional phrase here. But maybe you don't want to talk about they, and this would be farmers again, right? You're focusing on animals. You want to talk about the animals. That's the important part. So you start your sentence with animals. But you can't say animals raise. Animals don't raise. Farmers raise. So you have to use passive voice. Someone else is doing it to the animal, right? So we're going to use be verb. Animals are raised in CAFOs. Again, I could say by farmers or by somebody, but it isn't necessary. It's extra information. So this would be my active sentence, they raise animals, and here would be my passive sentence, animals are raised in CAFOs. So I saw a lot of mistakes where people wrote things like animals raised, right? Or crops plant. So look out for that in your own papers, okay? Let's look at a couple more examples. Farmers feed. I saw this one a lot of times. So farmers feed cattle. I saw a lot of sentences like this. Cattle feed with grass or corn, or cattle feed grass or corn. So I think I saw a lot of things like this. Cattle feed with grass. Okay. Cattle eat grass, but that's not the point. You're talking about what they're given, what people give to the cattle to eat, right? So the cattle is not doing this. It's happening to the cattle. The farmers are doing it. So here's our active sentence. And this one is incorrect. We need to use the passive voice. So feed is a present tense verb, so I'm going to use present tense be. Cattle's are. And now we need the past participle of feed. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But I'll tell you, it's fed. So cattle are fed, and you can just use directly grass. Cattle are fed grass. Cattle are fed corn. Okay, and then I just wanted to show an example of the negative. So Salatin never uses chemical fertilizers and pesticides to grow crops. This is a good sentence. It's active. I saw some sentences that looked like this. Chemicals and pesticides. I'll move my head. Never grow or never use by Salatin. Okay, so chemicals and pesticides don't use themselves. Someone else uses them. So you can't use a active voice structure. You have to use passive. So use is present tense. We're going to use present tense be. We're going to put it before the never. Are never, and then we need the past participle of use, used. All right. So those are some examples of passive voice problems from your papers. I just want to point out that passive voice can be used in any verb tense. It's not only with the present tense. You can use it in the past tense or any other tense. And here's two examples that you probably use all the time and never really thought about it as passive. So the first one is so common that this sentence probably sounds weird to you, and it's active. So this is the active sentence. Your mother bore you. Your mother gave birth to you. That's what that means. But what you normally say is, I was born. We say that all the time without thinking about why we say it that way. Something like, I was born in Portland by your mother. So this is the past participle of the verb bear, to give birth. Bore is the past tense, and so I'm using the past here. I was. So I was born. I was birthed by my mother. So we say that all the time without thinking about using the passive voice, but that's what we're doing. And then here's another one. Michael Pollan wrote the Omnivore's Dilemma. Normally, we start with the Omnivore's Dilemma. We start this way, right? And then we say the Omnivore's Dilemma was written by Michael Pollan. This is an example of passive voice because the book didn't write itself, right? It was written. Someone else did it. And in this case, we need the by phrase because we want to know who did it, right? So I'm going to give you some practice with other sentences connected to your topic. And you can think about when to use the active voice and when to use the passive.